but we're really happy today to have two really wonderful presenters with us. We have Joanna Kane Potaka, who is Deputy Director General of Strategy, Engagement, and Impact at the International Rice Research Institute. And then we're going to start off with Dr. Karuba Krishnaswamy, Assistant Professor of Sustainable Food Systems Engineering at University of Missouri, who have been really instrumental in helping us, in more than helping us present these webinars. Without University of Missouri and Sophia, who's doing all behind the scenes work, none of this would be possible. But today, in general, we have two presentations, and the overall topic is innovations in millets for sustainable food systems. We're going to start off with Dr. Krishnaswamy, Karuba Krishnaswamy, as I said, who's Assistant Professor of Sustainable Food Systems Engineering at University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri. Karuba has a joint appointment in the Department of Chemical and Biomedical Engineering and Sustainable Technologies, which the acronym is the FEAST. It's the FEAST Lab, F-E-A-S-T, appropriate word, which integrates convergence sciences with engineering principles to address interconnected challenges of food and nutrition security, which millet is obviously integral if we can keep it moving forward. And Karuba uses a circular food systems approach to support the UN Sustainable Development Goals. She has a what is that? What's B-Tech? It's a Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Technology in Food Process Engineering from Tamil Nadu Agricultural University in India, and she obtained a Canadian Commonwealth Scholarship for graduate research and continued her PhD in bioscience engineering from McGill University, Canada, which is a great place. She worked on 3 large-scale food fortification projects with micronutrients during her postdoc at the University of Toronto. So lots of experience for Karuba Krishnaswamy. And I just leave it at that and let Karuba take over, because both speakers today are fascinating, and we'd like to hear from you. So Karuba, please go ahead.
Thank you, John, for that kind introduction. And I hope you're able to see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Great. Thank you. And today we're going to talk about innovations in millets for sustainable food systems. And before I go into the story, I want to say why we started our research program in the FEAST Lab. So as we started the 21st century, we saw a lot of natural calamities, from wildfires to earthquakes to tsunamis, and obviously the pandemic that the whole world experienced. And that's when we thought how fragile our food system is. And that whenever we have challenges, both pandemics, natural disasters, or conflicts, it affects the most vulnerable population groups. Right around this statistics is before the onset of COVID, and we had around 821 million people affected by chronic hunger. That is 1 in 8%. But after the pandemic, this is the most recent statistics that we have. Around 828 million people are affected by chronic hunger. So chronic hunger is when a person or a population group doesn't have access to nutritious food for a prolonged period of time. So we say, oh, it's just 7 million people added, but it's not 7 million people. These are not just statistics, but human beings. They have families. They have it's the livelihoods of people. So it's a much more complex challenge that we're discussing. So this is on one hand, we have a big problem feeding people. On the other hand, there is something much more dangerous called the hidden hunger. And I'm sure that most of us in this group would have heard about hidden hunger. And for those who are new to this terminology, it is due to micronutrient deficiencies. Around 2 billion people on this planet are affected by either iron or zinc deficiency, irrespective of developed and developing countries. Most of us are affected by this. That is roughly 1/3 of the global population. And around 7 million children, before they reach their 5th birthday, die annually because of malnutrition problem. So this is a big challenge. And this is what we're trying to address in my research program. So when I had this opportunity to start my own research lab, and we call it as a feast lab, we thought, okay, we have multiple problems and how can we connect them? So on one hand, we have 2 billion people affected by hidden hunger. And whenever we talk about hunger or hidden hunger, we always talk about wasting and stunting. But actually, overweight and obesity also falls under the same umbrella. And this is what we call the double burden of malnutrition. And recent Lancet reports and have reported that micronutrient deficiencies play a very key role in both these challenges. And this affects around 2 billion people, right? This is on one hand. On the other hand, around 1/3 of all the food that's produced on this planet Earth is lost or wasted annually. So you see, we have like there's people without food on one hand, and there's 1/3 of the food that's produced on this planet is going as waste. There's technically a big challenge here. So what we're trying to do is, if we know the technology or process, then we will not be calling this as food loss or food waste, but it becomes a raw material for processing, right? Because in nature, there is nothing called waste. Waste is a terminology that is created by humans. Because if we can learn from nature, then because nature is very cyclic, right? Every product becomes a food for another product or a resource for another system. So it's more cyclic in nature. So if we can learn the nuances and adapt from those systems, learn from those natural systems, then it will become raw material for processing to any other product. So this is what is the whole idea. Can we convert this? So the connecting dot, what you're trying to do is, can we create circular food systems to address hidden hunger by connecting these two dots? And so this is the vision for our lab. And I know it's a complex challenge. There is no single bullet to solve this, but everyone can contribute. So how we are contributing in our research lab is, it's these through quadrants. One is sustainable food systems engineering, where we do a lot of upcycling of food-based food loss to add value for value addition, as well as to prevent indigenous food loss prevention. So that's one area. Once we recover them, they are in native state. So we do innovative delivery systems from nanoscale to macro scale delivery systems. So we can protect these bioactives. And then we fortify them back into food systems to develop therapeutic foods that's fortified with vitamins and minerals, predominantly addressing hidden hunger. So all the research projects we do align with the UN SDGs, number 2, and the population group that we're interested are in women, children in urban, rural, and tribal communities. So that's the whole vision and the overview of our research program. And I'm just going to share with you one case study with millets. As I said, like SDG 2, you can see we all, in 2015, when the whole world came together to come up with an agenda for our 2030, SDG 2 was one of the important one. But another important thing is partnership for goals, because we cannot achieve either of these goals individually in silos. And all these goals are somehow interconnected. And that's how in most of our projects, we see how food and health and education and poverty, they're all somehow interconnected. So that comes to our case study 1, that's millet innovation. And in this case study, what we're going to do is, so why millets? This whole year we've been talking about millets, and we have been, I completely enjoyed this webinar series, learning from so many experts. So we know it's drought tolerant, climate resilient, it has health promoting properties, and it also has very high amount of vitamins and minerals, the composition. And the structures, though when we see them, they all look spherical and similar in shape. But when we put them under an electron microscope, we can see there are structural differences that contributes to the chemical characterization and physical characterization parts. So I'll walk you through a little bit more there. So as you know, that the global production after the world wars, that's when you saw the decline in the production of like millets and other underutilized crops, when more focus was given to the big, like the corn, soybean, wheat, rice, and so on. So significantly, we saw a decline in the production of millets. But thanks to the International Year of Millets and amazing champions who are taking this forward. We see a momentum that's building forward to build a more robust food systems to have millets incorporated. So that's where we are now. So we saw a decline, and slowly we are gaining momentum. And why it's important is because, like here, these are all named because of different millets. Is LAW is little millet, banyan millet, and different compositions of millets. So you can see the carbohydrate content, the protein content, the moisture content, the fat, the fiber, and the ash content of most of these millets are quite high. And that's why when we mix these millets together, if a foxtail millet with a proso millet, proso has a high protein content, or if you want to have, so we can make our formulations to suit the needs of people. And that's what makes them so versatile in food systems. And so, yeah, that's what I'm trying to highlight here, saying there's high amount of crude proteins. And when we talk about proteins, what is much more unique that we don't see it in rice or wheat or corn is the amino acid profiles. So we have essential amino acids and non-essential amino acids. So essential amino acids are required for us to consume through food because our human body cannot naturally synthesize it. And we can find all our essential amino acids in most of our millets. Like if you can consume millets or different combinations of millets, you can see the relative proportion of, like, this is for maize and wheat. And let me pull this up. So you can see relatively high amount of essential amino acids in most of our millet formulations compared to maize and wheat. So that is a good sign, right? If like nature has given such an amazing combination of all the essential amino acids packed in that small little mighty grains. And it's for us to understand these nuances and try to develop those formulations. So that's something that we found very unique when we're conducting this research. And that is also important for the functional properties, because millets are a really good high source of protein, containing these amino acid profiles, the dietary fibers, the energy, and the mineral when compared to rice, wheat, and maize. And so, especially for women and children, when they need more of these essential amino acids, either during the reproductive phases or during the growth phase for children, it's highly recommended we can incorporate them so they can get it through food systems. So that's what I wanted to talk about, the chemical composition of it. Now I want to share something related to the physical characterization of these millets. When we saw that first image that I showed you, when we look at millets, they all look spherical, round, small seeds, right? But when we put them under an electron microscope, you can see there is structural difference. So here, this is an amaranth. In this study, we had both sorghum and amaranth comparing with millets. You can see it has a beautiful overcoat in the amaranth. And here, please pay attention to the little millet, the banyan millet, and the kudo millet. You can see the surface is, there is degradation in the surface, right? This is because all these millet has an outer coat, the shell. You need to shell it. And when we're doing that, it's a mechanical process, right? So we are abrasively moving it. And that's why you can see those damages. And why it's important to reduce this damage is because if we have more damage, then we'll have storage, like, moisture, contamination, as well as it can be prone for degradation of these nutrients. So, and also rancidity, like, when you're mixing with foods and other components, there's oxidation problems, rancidity problems that can arise if it's not processed, if it's damaged mechanically. And so that's one thing. But you can see for finger millet, it doesn't have an outer coat, but you can see it has these microstructures, very fine microstructures. And that's what gives that protection to the finger millet. And as we know, finger millet is high in calcium content. So naturally, all these millets have a physical property that helps in retaining these nutrients. And so when we conduct these, so this was the first study that was conducted to understand, to consolidate and report the structural morphologies of ancient grains. And as we study them more scientifically and understand its compositions, we are able to connect the physical, the chemical, and the health benefits of these millets. So now let's come back to some applications. Why? Because we want to avoid these things so people can get intact all the nutrients. Some of the applications that we find in recent, or the challenges or the innovations that's required is millet processing. Because all these grains are very small, it needs a partial separation and modification of three components, major components. One is the germ, then the starch containing endoplasm, and the outer protective pericarp. So those are all important. First, it needs to be removed so that the main purpose of this processing is to minimize the qualitative and the quantitative deterioration of the grains during post-harvest. So pretty much we want to minimize these damage. We want to minimize these damage so that it can retain maximum quality and quantity over a period of time. And because if the raw material is not of high quality, the end product, like the food that's being produced, that might not have the same amount of nutrient, right? Then when we're consuming it, people might not get the same amount. So it's so important to start from the field to processing to all the steps in the food systems. And so that's one thing. And then there are different ways of developing food formulations. We see a lot of food products with millets nowadays. And especially in North America, we can see snack foods that are cold extruded. So whenever we are developing formulation, it needs to go into different processing. Here, it's an extrusion process where you can develop pasta or vermicellis or extruded snacks using millets and semolina and millet semolina, mix it with different ratios and change the dye positioning and the shape so that you can get the right product structure and can be kept for a longer period of time and is going to be a value-added product. So that's a little bit on the food processing operations are undertaken to add value to these food commodities after the production cycle is taken care. And so after we produce it, we process it, and now it's packaged, and we get in the US, you can see a lot of proso millet is quite common in the grocery store, and also we can get some of the other millets like kudo millets, little foxtail barnyard through ethnic markets as well as through Amazon.com. So I've just put some of the pictures from the millets that are available in the market. And then since I'm from India, we use a lot of millet. I had my breakfast, I had millet dosa, my mother made some. So it's an integral part of our diet, and it's so nutritious as well as it can. It's so yummy. So once you start consuming it, then you'll feel how tasty this amazing grain is, and it gives all the health benefits, right? You get essential amino acids, dietary fibers. So why not incorporate it into our food system? So that gives me more motivation to conduct this type of research and understand the technical details and the ancient knowledge and see how they can contribute to a holistic food system. To summarize, what I wanted to say is millets have a great potential to add diversity in our farming food systems, and they provide resilience for climate change, especially in hot and dry conditions. They have a diverse genetics, and that provides versatility to use in multiple foods. And that gives the diversity itself is so enriching in order to have a robust food system in the future. And this deserves more research, exploration, development, and partnership to take it forward. So that, because why I say this is because we all eat, and currently we are around 7.5 billion people on this planet, and we are going by 2050 expecting around 10 billion people. How can we feed them with nutritious food and sustainably? So millets play a very important role in that. And to conclude, to summarize all these things, is we need to have more circular systems for our food systems transformation. And partnership is so important. We cannot address all these things in silos. And that's what the whole webinar series is all about. We had a beautiful series of speakers from production to processing to marketing. And so this could be a nice start for us to take these conversations forward. And we need more technology, creativity, innovations, as well as policies in place in order to have a healthy and happy planet. On that note, these are some of my references, and I want to leave with this particular thing because it summarizes what we are facing today. So on that note, I will wish you all a happy new year, happy holidays, and thank you for your valuable time.
Great, thank you, Karuba. So interesting. The whole discrepancy between the number of folks in the world who don't have enough to eat or are malnourished in some way, and the food we don't use. It's not used or wasted. That's troubling to begin with. But the idea that millets can help rectify that problem is also wonderful. And what you said was really profound. Just take the plunge and taste some millet, because it really does taste good, and there's so many choices, and it's so good for you. That's why we're here. That's why it's the International Year of Millets. These are all points that all of our speakers so far have touched on in one way or another throughout 2023. And thank you very much for summarizing it, and also the technical information you provided. The idea, it looked like pearl millet was like, kind of perfect. It's my favorite too. But that was really every seminar we find out something we hadn't known before. So thank you again, Karuba, and let's move on to Joanna Kane Potaka. We can have questions afterwards, and I would like to mention once more before we move forward that, as Don said at the beginning of this hour, that all of these seminars are available at YouTube, and we'll provide you with the links to that once again. Thanks again for everyone for being here. We have a few more people now than when we started, which is great. So let's hear from Joanna Kane Potaka, who's Deputy Director General, focused on strategy, engagement, and impact at the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines. And just a little background on Joanna. She began her career as an agricultural economist in her home country, Australia, and then moved to different places in the world and into different types of work, including marketing-related areas in agribusiness strategy, communications, uptake of scientific research, and business development. So very well-rounded career. Joanna has worked in private industry, government, and for nonprofits, including 5 CGIAR centers. She's lived in India, Sri Lanka, Italy, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Australia, and has over 30 years of professional experience. Previously, Joanna was the Assistant Director General of External Relations at ICRISAT, the International Crops Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics, based fundamentally in India, but they do a lot of work in millet, especially in West Africa and India. And she is the founder and executive director, was the founder and executive director of the Smart Food Initiative, which was selected by USAID and the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade as one of the top 10 global food innovations initiatives. Joanna is a Bachelor of Economics, Graduate Diploma of Management, Professional Postgraduate Diploma in Marketing, and Master of Science in Global Marketing, and has been a certified practicing marketer in Australia, and an associate of the Chartered Institute of Marketing in the UK, and a fellow of the Australian Marketing Institute. Joanna, like Karuba, has been with us all year in various roles, always staying in touch with each webinar, and we're really finally happy to have Joanna front and center to tell us about innovations in millets and a food systems approach. So take it away, Joanna, please.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan, and that's great. All right, so I think Karuba's shared my screen. Okay, I was happy to do it, but I didn't have screen share allowed.
You want to share the screen? Because
Yeah, you'd have to enable me to do it though. It just says the host
Oh,
has disabled me from sharing. That's all.
okay with you.
All right, we'll give it a go. And
Yeah.
if
Can you try now again?
okay. Yeah, now it's allowing. Thank
Okay.
you so much. Okay, I'll put on. Okay, is that clear? That's okay?
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Okay, excellent. All right, thank you. All right, and first of all, a shout out and thank you to NAMA for organizing this whole year of webinar series and for your dedication and initiative for everything. So thank you, and I'm happy to be the last speaker of the year for the International Year of Millet. Okay, and so the topics was about more innovations in millets for a food system approach. And I'd like to start with a background on the food systems that we are working with specifically within trying to popularize and mainstream millets. Okay, so if we first look at the whole development and food security systems, so what we had there initially, the very big focus decades ago in 50s and 60s was just the focus was on food security, which was just about having enough food to eat, which was really critical back then. Over time, just like Karuba mentioned, the whole hidden hunger people became more aware of that. So we added nutrition security to our focus. And then more recently, there became the awareness more on the planet and how we can have sustainable diets. And so that's been the movement of thinking over the decades. And what we were really trying to push is the next stage or the next big focus really should have been combining these and then going one step further and looking at food systems that are good for the consumer, the planet, and the farmer, and how you really can bring that together, which is what we termed back 10 years ago as smart food. But as when we were working on this smart food sort of movement globally, we looked at, well, how can you really have big impact? And really saw that you can have big impact if you do it through staples. Because we were focused very much on the developing countries or across Asia and Africa, where staples really are 70% of the plate for most meals. And so that's where you can have big impact. But our biggest challenge in trying to change the staples was what I termed the food system divide. And just like any divide, so what happened is the big three, the wheat, maize, and rice, had the vast majority of investment, whether you're talking about policy support, private industry investment, product development, even development aid, the vast majority went into the big three. So if you invest in something, of course, it does well. You know, it develops the value chains, the consumer market is grown, and so as it does well, it then attracts more investment, and so it does even better, and so it attracts more investment, and so the cycle goes. And so, of course, these three have been highly successful, have very well developed value chains, very well developed consumer markets. So it becomes more difficult to bring in another staple and diversify that base of the big three. So our aim became, how could we break that food system divide? And recognizing if we really wanted to do that, you had to focus just on one food at a time, because you really needed huge investment, develop the value chains, develop the consumer awareness and the markets. So that's where we started looking at smart foods and millets, but just a little bit more just to show that whole food system divide. So rice, wheat, and maize, the big three, accounts for 94% of all cereal consumption. They deliver 60% of global food energy. And years ago, there was an article in Nature that showed that 45% of private sector agricultural research investment was in just one crop, and that was maize. I mean, that's huge globally. This study that came out quite a few years ago, where it showed the change in relative contribution of crops to our diet by calorie intake. So the three big winners were oils, wheat, and rice. The three big losers were sorghum, cassava, and millets. So, you know, a really big change in what's happening in the diets there. And one example here from India, where you see from 1960 to 2020, the production of the major cereals. So rice, which already was sort of dominant, but it has tripled in production. Wheat has increased 800%, and now maize has started to take off. And millets and sorghum have stayed pretty stable there, which means they're getting left behind while others are growing. But quite a dramatic difference there. And that really also very much represents consumption as well as production. Okay, so you could say, does this really matter? Well, we know we've got a huge issue with climate change. And if you look at projected declines in yields, rice and wheat are going to be dramatically affected, even more than some of the millets with climate change. And just as Kiruba has mentioned, we know we've got big health issues still, from both the micronutrient concerns to the obesity concerns. So we do urgently need solutions that are going to cope with climate change, water shortages, soil degradation, malnutrition, and other diet-based health issues. We know we need more diversity on farm to help cope with this. We know we need more climate smart, resilient agriculture. We know we need more diversity in the diet, and we know we need that to be healthier diets as well. So that was our thinking behind when we started this global movement, the Smart Food. And it was all around just what I mentioned right at the beginning, around how we felt we needed to bring solutions together, solutions that were good for you, good for the planet, and good for the farmer. And we recognized millets were actually pretty unique in that they actually satisfied all of those three areas really well. And I won't go into detail in that because we've had a year of talking about the value of millets in those areas. So I deliberately did not detail that here. But what we found for the Smart Food movement is the two big areas we really focused on: getting more scientific evidence behind this and the advocacy and marketing. So I'm going to give a little bit background on those two areas of what we did, but just very, very briefly. So on the scientific evidence, actually just last month so we've been doing a decade of research on this now, but just last month we released probably one of the most advanced, like our latest work. And so this looked at how millets are good for you, the planet, and the farmer. So a whole team of us were involved, and I was particularly involved on the nutrition side, on how they're good for you. So we believe we have the latest information on what you can and can't say about how millets are good for you. It's a whole series of systematic reviews and meta-analyses, and it covers a wide range of areas, from diabetes to anemia and many other areas, and new areas not presented before as well. So we're pretty excited about that. It's not online yet. Give us one more month and it'll be available free online. We also did, back a number of years ago, the very first scientific-based school feeding studies for millets, and we did one in India and one in Tanzania. And we have a lot of lessons learned from that. It's not just a case of adding millets. It's how you do it, how you combine it with foods, how you do it with fun activities so kids learn about it as well. And we had some great success there. We also did the largest consumer survey ever undertaken on millets. So we had 15,500 face-to-face interviews across 7 states in India. And all of this work has been published, but I'm just presenting just a few. I just thought it'd be interesting here, just a few of the highlights from that survey, because even though it was in India, I find some of this relates quite well to many other countries. So the biggest reason people were eating millets: I have a health problem. So what you find is that the early adopters are people who were looking for a solution. For example, they have diabetes or other concerns. Then the biggest reasons why people do not eat more millets: no one else in the home eats it. So what that showed is that there's a potential for a multiplier effect if you can influence the right person who's selecting what they eat at home. Now, our surveys were in supermarket malls, so it was a higher socio-economic end of people. So 90% of the people interviewed were reasonably or very health conscious, but only 40% of those were sure that millets were healthy. So there was a potential for growth just through awareness about the health values of millets. And where people get most of their information on health and foods, it's social sources, very much the social media and advice from friends and family. That's probably not surprising, but it also helps us to realize how we could be more effective in the marketing of millets. We did many, many more studies, of course. We had a decade of studies, but just to highlight a few examples of what we deliberately sort of did, where we felt we needed to bring some evidence to the table that would help get more attention to millets. Then when we looked at the advocacy and marketing side, now we did a huge range of things. We had ambassadors, did a lot of media coverage, we created WhatsApp groups and so on. And I think all were helpful, and we linked with a lot of other groups that had the same sort of mission and vision that we had as well. I think Jonathan mentioned before, it was helpful when we won this sort of like prize of being in the top 10 global food innovations, because that helped us knock on doors more. And then the other sort of initiative that we had, which we felt could be a tipping point for bringing awareness about millets, was that we organized an event at one of the events FAO was having, and we asked a Minister of Agriculture from India to come along with us. He agreed to be a speaker, and then that opened every door. So we did all the meetings at FAO in Rome to find out how to get an International Year of Millets. We came back understanding how it happens. We wrote the first proposal. We took it to the government of India. We had one of our key people closely connected with the government of India, and he led that through the system. India got really excited about it, and then they took it forward from then. And of course, India's been absolutely amazing at leading this International Year of Millets. So, we started that thinking you need to do something more than what we were doing to really get the international attention. So, I mean, we've got a long way to go, but I think it's really worked in just putting it on the agenda, putting millets on the agenda. Now, we, of course, going back to our mission was about how do we popularize millets and bring them back as staples. Now, we ourselves could not, think we were going to influence consumers worldwide. So we had to be very careful to think, how could we drive demand? So we had specific areas. One is we worked a lot with SMEs, small and medium enterprises, all the startup companies, because they're the pioneers that change industry. They're prepared to come in when something's not yet big on scale, and they often have a really close mission themselves about caring about the environment and people. So we did a lot of work trying to see how we could support them as the pioneers. We did a lot with government, influencing government and policies, and we got a lot of great examples how we really were able to get government excited and change their policies and support millets, because there wasn't a level playing field for millets. We saw researchers as absolutely critical. The whole industry needed to develop, from whether it be from product development through to the yield. So even just trying to get researchers to see the value in this. And when we started the smart food movement, we had a lot of knockback, a lot of scientists, a lot of others that just laughed really and said, there's no way you're going to change consumer habits. And if you even did, we don't have the supplies of millets anyway. But that's catch-22, and it's a leader's attitude. But so our aim was to get researchers excited about this too, because we really need the research. And the other area we focused on was development agencies and NGOs. They do a lot of work, especially as we were really focused across Asia and Africa. And so we really needed to influence donors. And actually, I remember at one stage years ago sending some nutrition data about millets to Gates Foundation and how finger millet has 3 times the amount of calcium as milk. And they absolutely couldn't believe it, because it's super astounding, really. It's amazing, the nutrition value of millets. And they really just couldn't believe the data. And so it took years actually to persuade them this is real. So anyway, so that was sort of the way we worked with trying to drive demand, but working with a lot of other people and groups as well. At the end, if we've got time, I'll just show 2 short videos, which are both less than a minute, but just to show the examples of how we also try to be a bit creative with trying to get attention to millets. So in Kenya, we were really lucky. We had a fantastic team in Kenya who led this, who got on prime television a whole reality TV series on cooking with smart foods. And then in India, we did the first millet sort of cooking competition with student chefs, pan-India. And of course, millets back then wasn't even in their curriculum, even though it was a traditional food of India and really easily available. And I think that's changed now. Okay, so now millets fit most of the biggest global health food trends, or many of them, and also the different sustainability markets that consumers are becoming more and more aware of and that are growing. And you've got a whole list of them there, and there's more. But of course, any individual product can't be everything. So you really need to, like, we tried to work with the SMEs on how they could focus as well, where they could position their products. Now, I'm just going to show a few products and a few product stories. Now, as you know, India, of course, has the biggest range of millet products in the world. And this is just a tiny, tiny sample for what India has. But it's good to know that, other countries have millet products too. But of course, they're really niche markets, and consumers hardly know that they're there. So here in Australia, where you've got 7 grains and it's pre-cooked as a mix. Here in Germany, where you've got the foxtail millet as a baby porridge. I love this pear, apple, and millet mixture. And then even in France with millet and quinoa, pre-cooked mix. In Hungary, now there's many more examples, but I just wanted to show a bit of a range. In Hungary, you get this extruded millet balls products. In Nigeria, they make the Milo drink with sorghum. In Canada, that's a reasonably new product, the rain-fed millet milk. Malaysia, they've got a millet milk powder. Nigeria has the most delicious sorghum non-alcoholic malt drinks. They have alcoholic ones too. Of course, Australia and many products have got a gluten-free beer that's made with the millets or sorghum or some of the other millets too. Now, I love this story. This is Australia. Hopefully you might know Wheat Bix, which is a breakfast cereal. And this company in Australia wanted to bring out a gluten-free Wheat Bix because they are typically made with wheat. So they tested all the gluten-free grains, and they found that millet was similar enough to wheat that they didn't need to change their equipment, and it was locally available. It was easily available because it's mainly for feed and fodder, but it was there. So they made this Wheat Bix without any wheat, but with sorghum. And actually that top one's got 96% sorghum. Anyway, but you couldn't even see that sorghum was there when they first brought it out. So I said to them, well, why haven't you mentioned sorghum on the packaging? And they said, oh, well, consumers don't know what it is, so it added no consumer value, so we didn't put it on. Now, that's the challenge that we have. And of course, we'll never get the consumer to know about this and educate them unless we start that process. But that's a challenge that we have. And this is another example from Australia where I don't know if you have it, but you puff rice, and we make these, what we often call rice cakes or grain thins, and they're used like bread. You can make a sandwich. So this company thought, oh, let's use sorghum. It's an ancient grain. It's very exciting. So they puffed the sorghum and made the same grain thins. And when they first brought it out, they called it sorghum grain thins. It didn't sell at all. Sales didn't take off. So then they relabeled it the same product. They called it ancient grains, and sales went through the roof. So people understood ancient grains. They connect that with something super healthy, but they didn't know what sorghum was. So again, it's a challenge that we have. Here's an example in West Africa where Nestle brought out, everyone probably knows Cerelac. It's pretty much a global baby weaning product, and it's usually made with wheat. Now, wheat doesn't grow in West Africa. It's extremely expensive to import. So they wanted to find an alternative. So they found the pearl millet, which is grown easily and proliferate in West Africa. And so it's easy, it's cheaper, and it's high in iron and zinc. So when they first brought out their product, they had a very negative reaction from consumers. Now, I actually don't think it was the babies. It's the parents. And the parents were seeing that they felt that the pearl millet was inferior compared to the imported wheat. But Nestle said they were going to stick at this and do a marketing campaign to try to change that attitude and view of consumers. So again, an example of what you're up against when the consumer awareness is low, or it's a negative image, which isn't sort of really appropriate for the product. My last product example. So this is a great product and company in UK where they use sorghum and extrude it and make a tasty snack. And they make it super fun. Now, what their story is, it's a woman who's brought up in the UK, but she's Indian origin, and her grandmother taught her about the millets. So she got excited about that. And there was research in the UK that showed that in this lower socio-economic groups, very few people sit down and have meals together anymore, and that the majority of their food and calories come from snacking. So she wanted to see if she could come up with a healthy snack that was affordable. But it's not about saying this is healthy, eat it. Of course, that's not going to sell. It was about making it fun and her branding, but she still highlights the health aspects. And that actually they've just got the captain of the English soccer team to agree to be their ambassador, and he's bought part shares in the company, and so they're using that as a way to really promote it and get people excited. So it's a great story. So my last slide on just a few takeaway or sort of my thinking on key issues for the future of millets. So from the agriculture perspective, I think the next big move really needs to be more on the viability for the farmers, the yields, the sustainability. In India, there's been the huge push. You've got so many more products on the market, but farmers aren't necessarily growing more millets, and it's got to be made more viable. It needs the research poured into it, just like the big crops have had. I really believe we've got to keep this bottom line approach, this making sure it's healthy, good for the consumer, the planet, and the farmer. Make sure we go in unison and don't put them back in silos. And I think the level playing field, or if possible, incentives to bring millets back is going to be important. On the product and nutrition side, I think we've got to be super careful that millets stay whole grain and we don't get what happened to the really wonderful, healthy, nutritious rice and wheat that then became refined and polished, taking out the fiber and a lot of the nutrients. And we have an advantage with something like rice it's a generalization, but as a generalization, you can see white rice, you can see brown rice. That's polished, that's whole grain. We don't have that advantage with millets. I mean, a researcher may be able to see, and you'd have to, really know the grain, but the consumer won't know. Quality of products, I think, is important. It's been such a new product to bring in and create these processed, convenient products that I think we've got to be careful that they're really quality products on the market, and because when the consumer tries it for the very first time, it's really important, because at the end of the day, it's taste that will sell it. Nutrition washing, I think we've got to be careful of. We can do the ultra processing, we can add a lot of chemicals and other ingredients that aren't healthy. I've seen products on the market, say millet muesli, and then you look at the detail on the back, because I'm one of the very few people who read the detail on the back. I take a very long time in supermarkets, and it'll say 2% millet. So yeah, and then I think we've got to be really careful. We start to get this industry more mature to select by variety, and variety especially for the nutrition. So we've done a lot of studies, and in that new book I showed you earlier, we actually think that we have the best table in the world for what is the nutrition of millets. And the reason for that is because what we've done is we've collected hundreds of scientific journal articles where they mention the variety of the millet and the nutrition level. And so we put a range together. So you can quadruple the amount of iron and zinc in millet just by which variety you choose. That's huge. So we can't just say, oh, I'm going to use millet, or I'm going to use foxtail millet, and think it's got a particular nutrition profile. And lastly, on the marketing side, we still need to keep pushing with the marketing of consumers. And we need to get some of the large companies involved. I love supporting SMEs, but we also need to get the large companies involved because they have the large marketing budgets. But I think we need to support the SMEs with collective marketing as well. We need to keep working to reach the mass market. We're not there yet. That was our target. And we need to keep working on how we break that food system divide and diversify the staples. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Joanna. It's I'd like to see those videos, but we have to leave a little bit of time for questions. We can click on the videos ourselves, but it's really nice to have an economist, a social scientist, help round out our roster of presenters this year. It's and you know, when I was in school, they called it the dismal science, economics. But I feel very optimistic after hearing from you, Joanna, and just hoping there's some questions for either Karuba or Joanna to end out our series and our year, because this today in particular is very inspiring and gives me reason to hope. Here's a question, a couple of questions. A question from Alyssa Walters. Where will be the best place to find the Millet Foundation Guide when you publish in a month? That would be
okay,
for Joanna.
We got that funded by Odisha government through their Odisha Millet Mission. So it will definitely be on their website. I hope they have good enough web sort of promotion that you can just search it and find it. But you're welcome to contact me, or I can send it via Jonathan and Don and Joni as well.
Sure. Yeah. So just to clarify, we're talking about, there's two publications now. The one you were speaking about, Joanna, and then there's this one. Is this a different one? The FAO Unleashing the Potential of Millets that just came out. It's available at PDF online. Okay, yeah. That's terrific. All right, great. Any other questions? We still have some time when we can. No one's going to arrest us. We can keep going for a little while.
Hello, Jonathan.
Really
it's
question, but I do want to say thank you to both the speakers today. Nice overviews of where we're at with the millets, and really appreciate the work that's going on.
Yeah, David, we're hearing you. You had a question, David?
No,
I think we lost.
I
Now
was
you're
saying
on.
I didn't really have a question. I just appreciated the work that they were doing greatly.
Yeah. I just have to say, you know, as a Texas A&M, did a lot of work on millet and maybe still doing it, but particularly in West Africa. But I know they're still working on millet. And David's at Texas A&M. There are other universities, but really we can make a push on land grant universities in the United States to like look a little more at the millets. There's a lot of potential.
Okay, Jonathan, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Anyone.
Yep.
Who was that?
It's Molly. I'm based out of
Okay,
Raleigh,
Molly.
North Carolina.
Okay, great. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
yeah.
please.
So I have this question for Joanna. I hope you guys can see me now.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So Joanna, I have been following pretty much what the amazing work that you have been doing throughout the world from past year and a half. So from the slides that you shared, question for you is to increase on the demand. I think that's where I have some serious concerns right now. And it's a catch-22 situation, as you explained through the slides. Where do you see of the demand, especially in the Western countries? Let's just call it UK/US to begin with, since this is really a NAMA webinar series, and how long it might take. I have been seriously involved, hoping to market the millets from 2022. We are going to start 2024 soon. But really, I think the awareness and education that we are trying to kind of advocacy, as you say, it's a long way to go. So if you see my question, please help me understand from your perspective on how many more months or years it might take before there will be a great demand in the Western countries, Western world.
That's a really tough question. And you know, I had hoped the International Year of Millet would have done more on the consumer side. I don't think we reached that. We did get millets on the agenda and really aware, but I think we've got a long way to go. I think the approach is going to be very different in each country. It's not even yet where quinoa is, and we didn't even want to target it as a quinoa because that's so niche. It's extremely well known but very niche. We really wanted millets to get more into mainstream. I think unfortunately, I think the best way it will really take off is when big companies get into it, because their marketing budgets are huge. The only other way is if we can do more collective marketing through SMEs, the smaller and medium-sized enterprises, to actually get together. If every SME stays individual, it's very tough. If I'd stay, I mean, I left Smart Food now 2 years ago. If I'd stayed, that was going to be my next big push in getting the SMEs together. You've got to have some sort of certification, but you can do collective marketing. I don't think there's an easy solution. In the developing countries and across Asia and Africa, you can work a little more with governments in having special programs. That happens much less in places like US and Australia, UK.
Right.
But
I see your point.
Yeah. The other way also is moving. It doesn't get it well known with the consumers, but you get a bigger market, is moving with more institutional consumers. So you move through schools and other programs like that. Yeah.
Okay. One follow-up question, and you gave the example of Nestle in West Africa. Were you able to bring the marketing, or let's just say research budget, by trying to kind of persuade them, saying, you know what, the initial reaction has been super negative to the Cerelac product? How was the probably feedback or outcome of that example or experience? Was Nestle willing to fund a lot more money into some of that? I mean, I'm just throwing out an idea there of an example that you presented.
Yeah. I mean, they were going to throw money behind their own marketing, and that's what they're good at. They wouldn't need us for that. They're experts in that. And they were planning to persist and do the marketing to get the consumers on board. And I would say the real drive behind them was purely economic, because importing wheat was expensive and difficult, and the millet's right there, and it makes a fantastic product. Yeah.
Joni, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just typing. I have to run, but awesome presentations, both of them. I had to listen by phone to Karuba's, but I did just want to add that I've spent the last 3 years trying to educate the American sector, because we make a line of millet-based foods that are in distribution from coast to coast. And never once did we have one receptive person in retail, not Whole Foods, not Sprouts. They were clueless. They didn't want to hear. However, institutional, all ears. So Joanna, you're spot on right now that we are shifting our entire brand to just dealing with institutional and private label, because it has been just a war of attrition and getting nowhere. Like someone's going to have to spend millions of dollars in marketing to get through to the CPG sector. It's very frustrating. Having been fighting that battle for years. And I know Sujala with RainFed has, also had some similar frustrations, and anyone who's working with domestic adoption in the retail CPG world, New Hope Network, we've presented like, hey, let's talk about millets. Nope, didn't want to talk about it. Totally deaf to it. So I think that those institutional players are going to prove to be very important moving forward, because they're early adopters right now because of not only the nutritional conversation, but the ESG metrics behind the millets is really favorable. And when your institutional procurement is doing calculations on externalities and ESG and all these kind of weird abstract things, that's actually creating a wake-up call that is being completely missed by the American retail sector. So I have to run. I'm so sorry, because this conversation is so amazing. But
Yeah,
thanks,
this has been
Joni.
a
Just
fantastic
before
year,
you go,
everybody.
Joni,
Yeah.
we're all looking for what NAMA, how we can leverage this year and all our webinars and what NAMA could do next year. So we will be getting back in touch with everybody who's been in these webinars and on our registration list, so that to receive your input on what to do next, because we have a little bit of momentum. We need to increase that.
Yeah.
And it's been a really great year. I really thank everyone for taking the time
Amazing.
every month to be here, and have a really safe end of the year and a really wonderful 2024. And thank you all again. It's been a great year. We'll be back in touch with you. So you take care. Thanks, Joanna. Thanks, Kiruba.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Yep.
Bye.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Happy
all.
Same
holidays.
to you.
Bye, everyone.
Same
Yeah.
to you.
Happy holidays.